George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. And today we have a conversation about your mental health, especially for your Black boys and youth, Black and brown boys in particular. And this is part of our program Tuesday night, 6 o'clock, where you can see it live on YouTube. You go to my page, George Kilpatrick, and you will find it. We're talking about mental health, working with the Building Men program and the My Brother's Keeper program. And we're pleased to be joined by two individuals who will be a part of that discussion to help us to see where we need to be and to get well and to get better. First of all, we're joined by Adrian Hargrove. He's a youth mentor, educational mental health advocate, and motivational speaker who has dedicated his life to the service of others. He has formed a nonprofit organization called, what is it? He's the program director for the Harris Home for Children, but also the senior vice president of philanthropy and community involvement with Affinity Recruiting LLC. And he's also earned his bachelor's in business administration, his master's degree in public administration, and is currently working on his doctorate in education and organizational leadership. Adrian, welcome to the program.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
Also joined by Dr. Brandon Hollie. That has a nice ring to it. He received his doctorate in marriage and family therapy from Syracuse University, and he has graduate degrees from the University of Iowa and from Mount Mercy University. Passionate about social justice, politics, and mental health. He's particularly interested in Black males and the intersection of gun violence, poverty, mass incarceration, and parent-child relationships and mental health. He's also one of the therapists that offers free therapeutic services to through the Syracuse University's Marriage and Family Therapy Program and the Syracuse Community Connections for services to Black and brown communities, and lots more of what he's doing in the community, including the regional program director for short-term crisis respite programs at Liberty Resources. Dr. Brandon Hollie, welcome to the program. And let's begin with you, Dr. Hollie. What are you seeing now regarding our mental health, especially as Black men and Black boys?
Yeah, thanks for having me, George. One thing I will say is the stigma is decreasing, right? So we typically in a Black and brown communities, mental health isn't a thing. You know, we've been taught that it's not okay to share your emotions. It's not okay to talk about what's going on in your life outside of the family. And a culture shift, you know, I think that starts with people that we really look up to in a Black community. So you have individuals like Tarahi talking about mental health, you know, Meek Mill's talking about mental health, Charlemagne the God saying, go to therapy, your mental health is important. And they're also talking about Black toxic masculinity. And that's catching with the Black and brown communities. So individuals are feeling like, hey, if these people are giving therapy a try, I'll also give therapy a try. And so we're seeing that stigma decrease a little bit.
What does Black toxic masculinity look like?
So Black toxic masculinity, I mean, that it comes out in a variety of ways. So one, it looks like always being strong and not showing your emotions, you know, so we're taught in the Black community that if you're vulnerable, you're weak, you know, and weakness allows you to be taken advantage of. In certain communities, you have to be strong if you don't want to be taken advantage of. So, you know, if we're feeling sad, we don't talk about feeling sad. If we are angry, we don't talk about feeling angry. We have to hold it in and be tough. We have to be macho. And society convinced us of that, and that's not necessarily the case. In fact, it causes more harm than it does good. And so we're trying to shift that narrative in the Black culture.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, we in preparing for the interview that we are doing tonight, we heard a young man speak about the neighborhood he grew in and how he had to appear to be tough. And so how do you balance the ability to show emotions, but also appear to be tough? And then I'll pick up Adrian for that as well.
Certainly, and that's a great question, George. I think that it's okay to talk about when you're feeling sad, right? And as men, sadness often comes out as anger. And then when we're angry, we engage in things that we didn't necessarily want to engage in. So it's okay to have boundaries, set firm boundaries. You know, there's certain things that I have to stand strong on. I'm not going to let anyone take advantage of me. I'm going to be strong for my family and stand up for my loved ones. But when I'm hurt, I'm going to talk about that. When I'm grieving, I'm going to talk about being sad and talk about my emotions. These are healthy tactics that we've just learned aren't healthy. And so it's a balance between learning healthy boundaries, but also knowing when it's okay to share emotions, and sharing emotions is okay.
But I'm going to dig down a little bit again. If I'm in a community where I have to wear that exterior of being tough, is that okay to do that to survive if that's what it takes? Or that's
So
what I think it takes. Let me say it that way. Yeah.
yeah, so it's a both and, right? So I don't think that it's necessarily true that you have to be tough to survive in certain communities. I think that society has convinced us that you have to be tough or you're going to be taken advantage of. As a whole, I think that if we come together as men and say, hey, you know, like that's not cool to be acting tough all the time, you know, like you're hurting. It's okay to talk about what's really going on for you. You know, you just lost someone really close to you. You don't have to act tough and act like you aren't impacted by that. That's lame. You know, like let's truly talk about what's going on for you so that you can try to avoid some of the traumas that come along with that. So it has to be a community effort. I think it starts with seeking help. It starts with individuals shifting the narrative on what's cool and what's not. So yes, do you have to be aware of your surroundings? Do you have to be there for your family members and stick up for your loved ones? Sure. But always having a tough exterior isn't necessarily helpful. And in fact, again, I think it causes more harm than it does good.
Adrian, you started your organization called the Heart Grove as well. And this is based on some of your own personal experiences. First of all, let me get you to comment on what Brandon just said about growing up in the community and having to wear that exterior as a means of survival. What are your thoughts about that?
I completely agree. And just he hit it the nail right on the head as far as saying, as a community, it's our job to change that narrative. Working with the young men in the group home setting, I constantly see that, you know, especially, you know, new guys come in and it's like, I've got to put up this front, you know, I've got to show that I'm tough so that no one bothers me. But what I've tried to create is an environment that shows them that there is strength in being able to say, hey, that hurt my feelings. I don't appreciate it. And that doesn't mean you're weak. To me, that's even, you know, trying to teach them that it takes a strong person to be able to say, you know what, that bothered me. And, you know, as men, teaching them to be able to express our feelings, like Dr. Hollie was saying, doesn't necessarily have to be you're weak because you're sad. You know, we get kids, they lose loved ones, especially when they're in placement and they feel like I can't be there for my family or I can't be there for my siblings. And when things happen, they automatically want to react with anger or with an outburst. But in reality, they're really hurting. And so teaching them to be able to express that hurt without the outburst, you know, it's okay to cry. You know, I always tell them you can come in my office and cry if you need to. Like if you don't feel like, you know, it's a safe place to cry in front of your peers. But I think as men like ourselves, being able to create that environment for younger men and for, you know, even ourselves to where you can say, you know what, this is a safe place to express your feelings. And I think the more that we're able to do that, the more it becomes normalized. Like Doc was saying, you start having people, celebrities or what have you, speak on mental health and speak on those things and start to normalize it a little bit more. And I think the more that we see that, then it becomes the environment where it's like, oh, it is okay to talk about those things.
So what, in your own experience in this work of advocating and supporting youth, is do you talk to your youth about?
Honestly, I always tell them I'm preaching to myself because I'm always talking to them about, hey, man, what's going on? Come talk to me. Come express your feelings, don't act out. But then I had to take a look in the mirror at some point in time. And even in my own relationships, I realized that I held a lot of stuff in. And it might not have been an angry outburst where I'm blowing up and fighting someone, but I dealt with a lot of inner, trauma and inner struggles that I didn't talk about. And it impacted, relationships, in my own life. And so I had to kind of take a step back and think about it and say, man, I'm telling these kids to do something that I'm not doing myself. Mm-hmm. And that's when I, realized that I needed to step out and get some therapy. It's like I'm telling them, hey, in our program, it's a requirement that you talk to the therapist. And then, some kids would ask me, there was that stigma. Well, I'm not crazy. I'm not going to therapy. And it's like, well, it doesn't necessarily mean you're crazy. But then I had a kid ask me, well, have you ever been to therapy? And I'm like, I have never been to therapy. So, it was, like I said, an experience where I said, you know what, how can I be asking them to do something that I'm not willing to try out myself? And I got into therapy last year. And I mean, some of the things that, were revealed to myself, about myself, things that I had suppressed and not realized that things that happened in my childhood, things that happened in my life and how it impacted my life, the way I view things, the way I handle things. It was a real eye opener. And I feel like it's helped me become a better, program director in dealing with these young men, because now I can say, hey, I've been there, I've gone myself, and this is how it's helped me, and kind of helping guide them through that process and remove that stigma of, therapy is for crazy people.
So it took somebody asking you if you ever been to therapy to actually go to therapy?
Right. It was one of the kids. I was on him about seeing his therapist as it's part of our program. And, he was just like, have you ever been? I was like, no, I haven't. And so, it made me kind of take a step back as far as getting involved myself. And having to get in there myself and experience it. And it was a tremendous blessing for me, I must say.
Was there sort of like a liberation feeling for you?
It was. It truly was.
Yeah, talking with Adrian Hargrove, founder of the Hargrove, but also he's works in group homes and advocate and mentor for youth. Dr. Brandon Hollie is a therapist here in Syracuse, among other things, but looks at the intersection of gun violence and certainly mental health in our community. And I want you to say something about that, because obviously Brandon, and he allows me to call him that, so don't think I'm not honoring his honorific, but can you can you talk a little bit about that piece of it, your work that you're doing around gun violence and mental health?
Yeah, thanks, George. And I'll take it a step further. So when it comes to mental health, individuals aren't just experiencing, anxiety, depression, PTSD. It's a process on how people get there, and a process to how Black people develop. It looks a lot different than other folks, So when you live in neighborhoods where there's extreme poverty, and I want to preference this by saying that people were placed into poverty. They aren't just, they aren't lazy. There's structures that have placed people into poverty. Mm-hmm. Have these lack of materials. So when you're worried about putting food on the table, how bills are going to get paid, individuals will start engaging in crime to make ends meet, so that's where, robberies happen, drug deals happen, and inevitably gun violence follows that. And so it's really the violence and the trauma that happens within those neighborhoods that contributes to the mental health in the Black community.
And as you're talking about this, Brandon, Dr. Hollie, would you also, as you're answering this, bring in the impact of racial trauma as well, and how that might also be a factor, if you will?
Certainly. Everyday Black people experience racial trauma, and I like to preference it by saying that Black and brown people we have this unique ability to identify when people are uncomfortable around us, to identify biases, whether it's explicit, or implicit biases. And when you're holding all of that trauma in for so long, that you're marginalized, that you're oppressed, you live in these neighborhoods where there's poverty, there's violence, eventually that's going to start to look like depression. There's going to be a lack of sense of hope. Eventually that's going to look like anxiety. All I hear about is people getting shot in my neighborhood. Every day, I hear about someone else getting buried. So of course I'm worried about myself. Extreme worry, that is anxiety. Fear, that's anxiety. So it's really a cycle of abuse that continues to happen that contributes to the mental health within our communities. But because we've been convinced for so long that mental health isn't a thing, we shield it, we hold it in.
Mm-hmm.
I like the analogy of like a soda pop, like when you're steadily, you're getting shook. When you finally open up, you explode, versus if you slowly open it up, you're going through these problems, but I'm taking the steps. I'm going to therapy. I'm talking about my grief. You don't explode when it's time to make change happen. And so, it's really a cycle that we're trying to break, and we're trying to change the culture in the Black community.
Adrian, as we think about what we're hoping to accomplish on Tuesday night and beyond Tuesday night, what's your message to youth, and what are the tools that you give people to overcome their, first of all, the hesitancy around seeking support services, but also about how they can improve their lot in life and overcome the very conditions that Brandon talks about?
So one of the, I guess the tools, the way I've broken it down, was something that worked for me. And I call it my ABCs to success. And it's awareness and attendance.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be aware that there's an issue, and then we have to show up, whether that's to class or school or to a job or to therapy. We got to be aware, and we have to show up. And then the B is our belief in our behavior. We've got to believe. We've got to believe that we can make a change. We've got to believe in ourselves, and then we've got to behave in that way. And then consistency and communication. Once we become aware and we're showing up, we're believing, and we're behaving a certain way, we have to be consistent with that. And then we've got to communicate. If we need help. One of my big issues, in school was I hated asking questions. I never wanted to be that guy to raise my hand and ask a question. I didn't want to be called on. But helping them to get over those obstacles or that hesitation or fear of asking a question and asking for help. So, letting them know to communicate when we need help, and that it's all right.
How do we overcome, Brandon, this idea that to be smart is to be weak? To be smart. Adrian, you can answer that too, because I see you feeling me on that.
Yeah. again, you're right. That's a strong narrative, you know, for some reason to be smart in our community. So for a long time, it's been something that's not cool. We have to change that. You know, we have to, and I think it starts with the older folks within a community, you know, preaching that, you know, go get that degree, you know. It's okay. It's cool to read. It's okay to, you know big words. It's okay to want to be a doctor. It's okay. It's cool to want to be a therapist. I think for so long we have looked up to the wrong role models in our communities. And, you know, that's why I'm so excited about this event. You know, it's going to give people a chance to look at individuals that have come from the same place as them, that look like them, that experience some of the similar things that they've experienced, but have said, it's cool to be smart and no one's going to tell me differently. And so it starts with shifting that narrative, and it starts with the older folks within our community preaching that message.
Adrian?
I completely agree. One of the tools that I also use, I think the gentleman's name is Anthony Flynn. I heard him speak once, and he said, oftentimes with our youth, it's not an intellect issue, it's an interest issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we equate intellect with just grades in school.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've tried to do with the youth I work with is to show them that you're already smart. It's just a matter of what you want to be smart about.
Right.
So, you know, if I got a kid who's saying, well, I want to be a drug dealer, well, you got to be smart to be a successful drug dealer. So it's a matter of saying, hey, let's take that away from dealing drugs and let's put that skill somewhere else. So it's not that you're not smart. We just got to find something that you're interested in that we can put those skills to versus, you know, dealing drugs or doing something illegal. You know, get kids in a program, they'll come up with any and every way to try to sneak around and do different things. And I try to tell them, if you took that same effort and that same skill that you took to try to do all of this manipulation into something more positive, you'd be successful. So really telling them, like, you're already smart. It's just a matter of what you want to be smart about.
I'm hearing you and I'm feeling you on that. And I like how even if they said they wanted to be that, you didn't start with immediate judgment. You processed through it to get them to rethink it in a different way. So I appreciate that. I think that's also important, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It is really just a mind shift, because they expect that. I think like Doc was saying, because it starts with us as older people, I think a lot of times they expect us to shut down any and everything. They expect us to just, you know, criticize. But, you know, a lot of times I like to hear them out, you know, so when they say something and in my mind, I'm like, that's so outrageous. It's like, okay, well, let's play that out. You know, what's that look like? And then sometimes taking those same skill sets and those same things that they would say, well, this is how I would do this, and say, well, you know, if you took that and moved it over here, you could be just as successful, you know, in this area. And sometimes it's just a shift in perspective. And they're like, wow, I never looked at it that way. You know, I thought I could only be good at this. And it's just like, nah, you know, that's not the only option. So just really kind of helping them change their perspective and how they view themselves.
I appreciate that. Brandon, Dr. Brandon Hollie, how do people find out about your free therapeutic services?
Certainly. They can call the Southwest Community Center and just ask for the free therapy that's happening there. So we've been doing this since 2018 now. And not only is this free, this is therapy by Black and Brown providers, you know, variety of sex and genders there, and people that have been through things themselves. So we really try to decrease any barriers when it comes to this initiative.
And Adrian, how do people find you?
You can find me on Facebook at Adrian Hargrove, or Instagram, Adrian_Hargrove. A website is being built right now.
All right. Well, we'll look for you there on Facebook and on Instagram, and on Tuesday night at 6:00, the 18th of May, for our mental health panel through our My Brothers Keepers initiative. Thank you to Adrian. Thank you to Dr. Brandon Hollie, and we thank you both for the work you're doing. And for men in particular, Black men in particular, go talk to somebody and let's work this out together. And Brandon has asked me, we did a workshop last year called It's Okay Not to Be Okay, Black Men Healing and in Conversation. And we will do that again. I've made that commitment. We are going to set that up again. And we will, more details on that coming up, but we're going to put another one of those panels together, Black Men Healing and in Conversation. I'm George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation.